What if the events we call history never actually happened? Instead of a timeline of human progress, consider the possibility that recorded history is simply a massive, pre-rendered lore file loaded into our reality to give us a backstory. If we look closely at the period we call the Renaissance, it behaves less like a cultural awakening and more like an initialization sequence. This was the moment the system booted up, instantly generating thousands of years of fabricated past. If our timeline is a programmed simulation, it means the developers had to write the code. And where there is code, there are shortcuts, lazy redundancies, and algorithmic glitches left behind. When we stop treating history as a sequential timeline and start analyzing it as a raw dataset, the artificial nature of our reality becomes impossible to ignore. The timeline's most glaring structural anomaly is hard-coded into our calendar. Official records show two different counting systems existing simultaneously: Anno Domini, centered on the year 1 AD, and Anno Salutis, a calendar era marking a year of salvation. The Anno Salutis calendar specifically references the Jewish exodus from Egypt, a liberation from slavery that provides the original context for the celebration of Easter. The developers needed a compelling start for a brand new era. To get it, they copied the data of the Old Testament military leader Joshua. In Greek and older texts, Joshua's name translates directly to Jesus. Official chronology places the Exodus in 1313 BC. By moving the central figure of that event to the new start date of 1 AD, the developers created a 1,313-year gap, a mathematical void separating the original source code from the newly generated asset. Our modern world begins with a recycled file, ripped from an older dataset to provide the simulation with a sense of depth and continuity. The developers relied heavily on these copy-paste shortcuts. In the records of the Roman Empire, there is an incredibly lazy programming loop stretching from the year 337 to 602 AD, where the standard script for imperial assassinations simply stops running. Almost every emperor in this specific 300-year block mysteriously dies of natural causes. This completely contradicts the highly violent, unstable data blocks of the centuries immediately before and after it. This organizational chart maps the exact duplicated assets. In the peaceful loop, we find emperors Anastasios I and Justinian I. In the violent loops, their identical namesakes, Anastasios II and Justinian II, suffer the assassinations missing from the earlier block. The simulation split identical character biographies into two separate entries. By taking one life and looping it across two distinct points in the system, the algorithm artificially padded out the chronological timeline. Entire centuries of documented human history were auto-generated using simple redundancy algorithms. Emperor Anastasios I is the base model for the simulation's primary avatar. His name translates to the Resurrected One. His narrative provides the foundation for a resurrection story. He saved the Roman Empire from a systemic crisis, breathing life into a dying state. His successor, Justinian I, carried the actual given name of Peter. As the supreme head of the state church, this perfectly mirrors the exact data structure of Christ handing the keys to his first pope, Peter. We can track the algorithm by looking at the stars. Recalculating medieval eclipse reports shows events from the 5th century align with the sky exactly 521 years later. Applying this shift to Anastasios' coronation in 491 AD moves him to the year 1012. In that exact year, 1012 AD, medieval chronicles describe a massive nova appearing in the sky during the week of Easter. This astronomical anomaly was repurposed by the developers as the Star of Bethlehem. The simulation simply copy-pasted a Byzantine imperial code sequence, paired it with a recorded astronomical glitch, and output the Christian origin story. The ancient Greeks, the Romans, and the central figures of the Bible are not separate populations. They are identical non-player character files, shifted across the timeline by fixed mathematical offsets. The collision of these data points appears on the coinage of Emperor Justinian II, who was the very first ruler to mint currency displaying the frontal portrait of Jesus Christ. They share the same physical artifact because within the simulation source code, both of these figures belong to the exact same temporal data block. The system was rendering them simultaneously. This explains why the Roman Catholic Church only began officially counting years from the birth of Christ in the late 14th century. That was precisely when the simulation's boot sequence completed its generation process. When we look at ancient ruins, read old manuscripts, or examine historical artifacts,
we are not looking at the past. We are looking directly at the exposed source code of a pre-rendered reality.